The good news is that it is not essentially the global south, Africa, Asia, Oceania, that has been colonized. The bad news is that the global north is now colonized by the global north. The intersection of Silicon Valley, scopic colonialism, and cybercapitalism represents a critical nexus for understanding the power dynamics of our contemporary digital world. These forces converge to create a system that perpetuates forms of domination, surveillance, and economic exploitation, with Silicon Valley serving as the epicenter of this globalized digital colonialism. While the term slavery might seem exaggerated at first glance, it serves to highlight the profound exploitation and commodification of our digital presence by third-party corporations. These entities, akin to plantation owners, harvest the raw material of our existence, our data, behaviors, and interactions, for profit, often without our explicit knowledge or meaningful consent. This phenomenon, rooted in surveillance capitalism, represents a new form of subjugation, where digital users are simultaneously the producers, products, and consumers within a system designed for maximal extraction and minimal autonomy. Historically, plantations thrived on the forced labor of enslaved individuals, whose work enriched a small elite while perpetuating cycles of dependency and control. Just as enslaved workers had no choice but to toil on plantations, individuals today are coerced into digital ecosystems through monopolistic practices and the ubiquity of online platforms. Opting out of these systems is impractical, if not impossible, in a world where digital presence is tied to work, social connection, and access to services. Just as plantations extracted physical labor, tech companies extract data, the digital labor of our clicks, searches, and interactions. This data, the fuel of surveillance capitalism, is sold to third parties driving targeted advertising, behavioral prediction, and algorithmic decision-making. In the plantation economy, overseers maintain control and enforced exploitation. Data brokers aggregate and sell personal information, reducing individuals to commodified profiles. These profiles influence everything from what ads we see to the opportunities available to us, such as job offers or credit approvals. Unlike traditional transactions, where buyers and sellers are visible, data harvesting occurs invisibly. Users rarely understand the full scope of how their data is collected, shared, or monetized, further entrenching their exploitation. Digital platforms, much like plantations, create systems of dependence. Features like infinite scrolling and algorithmic content curation keep users tethered to platforms, ensuring a constant stream of behavioral data. Companies like Google, Facebook, Meta, and Apple create interdependent systems where users are discouraged from leaving. For instance, abandoning an Apple ecosystem may mean losing access to iCloud data, purchased apps, or iMessage functionality. This dependence mirrors the plantation economy's control over enslaved workers, who were economically and physically bound to the land they worked. The comparison to slavery raises important ethical and philosophical questions. While digital exploitation does not involve the physical subjugation and dehumanization inherent to historical slavery, it shares certain structural parallels. Just as enslaved individuals had no control over their labor, users often have no meaningful control over how their data is used once extracted. The profits generated by digital platforms disproportionately benefit a small elite, Silicon Valley executives and shareholders, while users receive limited value in return. Enslaved individuals were subject to surveillance and punishment to maintain compliance. Today, algorithmic surveillance and behavioral manipulation achieve similar ends, guiding users' actions and decisions while suppressing resistance through the illusion of choice. Marx's concept of alienation resonates in the digital context. Users, like workers in a capitalist system, are estranged from the value they create. Every digital interaction generates data, but users do not own or benefit from this labor. Instead, tech companies profit from the insights and monetization of aggregated behaviors. Constant surveillance alters behavior, leading to self-censorship, and a sense of always performing for an invisible audience. This psychological alienation deepens the exploitation as individuals lose not only control over their data, but also their sense of agency. The architecture of digital platforms, the monopolistic dominance of tech giants, and the pervasive commodification of human life create conditions where genuine resistance feels unattainable. If resistance seems impossible, it is not because the desire or need for it has vanished, but because the systemic and psychological forces of the digital age have rendered it functionally ineffective. Traditional forms of dissent, boycotts, protests, or alternative systems struggle to find traction against a machine that adapts, absorbs, and neutralizes opposition. This raises profound philosophical questions. Are we complicit in our subjugation? By participating in these systems, even out of necessity, do we reinforce their power? What does resistance look like in a digital world? Must it move beyond traditional models to imagine entirely new forms of autonomy and liberation? All sold as slaves to the plantations of the digital world. Script by Liviu, Poenaru, Doctor in Psychology, Geneva.